On this episode of For the Love of Chiropractic, Keys of My Success, I get the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Todd Cevene. Dr. Cevene is another very successful chiropractor. He has a blended practice, and he has a unique, special eye to see a hole in practice where there's a void that needs to be filled. And in my interview with him, he's brutally honest about his motivations towards success. Hello and welcome to Secrets of My Success, part of For the Love of Chiropractic podcast series. On each episode, I'll be interviewing one highly successful doctor or business person, asking them what are their 3 keys of success or secrets they've used to make themselves so highly successful. So let's get started with today's show. I have on the phone with me today Dr. Todd Cevene, who's speaking to us from his office. Todd, are you there?
I am. How are you?
I am great. Thank you for taking the time to share with us some of your knowledge and wisdom today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we get started, I want the listening audience to have some idea. So how many years have you been a chiropractor?
I'm old, so 25 years, 54 years old now. I think we've been open 25 years.
Awesome. Okay. So 25, 30 years ago, what was your path? How'd you get into chiropractic?
I got in when I knew I wanted to be a doctor in high school. I didn't know what type, and my parents were members of like a social racket club. And there was the couples they would always hang out with. There was one that was a chiropractor, one that was a family practice doctor, and another one was an anesthesiologist. And my mother was a homemaker, raised myself and my sister, and my father was a foreman at Chrysler, so just a normal blue-collar family. But what I noticed is all the 3 of the doctors, they all had, they seemed to have equal amounts of money. They had nice homes. Again, this is through the eyes of a high school kid, right? So They all had nice cars, nice homes. They all traveled. They all had pretty wives. So I thought, well, this is the way to go. And what I noticed about the chiropractor that stuck out was he seemed to have the most fun. So the anesthesiologist always got called away. So he always ended up halfway through the night, would always miss the night. And they had kids what my age would hang out with. That's how we were always around one another. So he always got called away. And the family practice doctor was always kind of stressed out and seemed to complain a lot about his job. Again, through the eyes of a high school kid. And the chiropractor really never complained and always seemed pretty happy. So I thought, well, the 3, that seems at least stressful. That's where I'm going.
That's awesome. So, and where did you go to chiropractic school?
I went to Palmer. I started Palmer, did a year and a half at Palmer, and then at the time was engaged and moved to Atlanta to finish off at Life in Marietta, Georgia.
So I'm curious. So when you started chiropractic school, based on that experience, had you been adjusted?
I had been adjusted, but I don't have like that chiropractic story where, my whole life changed. It was, just had a couple of adjustments, but I really didn't know that much about it. I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I knew that was a doctor and thought, cool, I'll try this route.
That's awesome.
Pretty simple.
Right. So you made an absolutely logical decision based simply on observation.
Yeah, that was, through the eyes of a high school kid. Yeah, there was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I wish I had something great. I got nothing.
No, I love that. Right. I started chiropractic school having never been adjusted either. And people are like, really? Well, why'd you become a chiropractor? But that's my story, and that's a whole nother story. So after you graduated from Life, did you open or you associated?
No, I associated with a doc in the Carolinas, and that was chosen because I wanted to be close to the ocean. So when I was interviewing places, oddly enough, this is 25 years ago, there was a PI practice I remember in Virginia that was hiring a provider, and they were paying at the time like $70,000, which was a lot.
That was a lot of money back then.
Right out of school. Yeah, and when talking to the doctor, he said, just look, your job show up 9 to 5, just do what I tell you to do, and kind of a robot job, right? Mm-hmm. There was another doc that was paying like half of that in the Carolinas, and he said, here's what we need, here's what we're doing, and he seemed very successful. And I asked him, I said, if I come here, I've got another offer that, in essence, secured, but it's a lot more money. But I really want to learn more than I want the money right now. And again, being a student with loans, I was used to ramen noodles daily for, living in a place the size of a patio anyway. So it wasn't too big of a deal. So he said, I'll teach you everything. And so that's why I chose that place and went. A year and a half went by, and then I went off back on my own and moved back to the Chicagoland area.
That's awesome.
In fact, I didn't know there was a school in Chicago. That the guy I knew said, where should I go to school? He said, go to Iowa. Mm-hmm. Okay. I didn't realize there was a school right next to me.
Right. And that's actually a school that I went to. So,
yeah.
So what's really interesting about what you just said, and I've heard this so many times and seen it over so many decades, is there's certain types of practices, and you listed a personal injury practice, that will pay a kid coming out of school, a young doctor, I shouldn't say kid, pay a young doctor coming right out of school significantly more money, but they're not going to learn anything, or they're going to learn very little.
Yeah, I wanted to learn. So again, through now the eyes of a student, which unfortunately for me from a business standpoint wasn't really much more probably than the high school kid. I just, again, looked at house, car, success, appearance, language patterns, how they seem to live, what they did, travel, and, things that you'd have to have money for, I guess, and thought, if I can learn what this guy knows, man, I'll be a lot better off than just, get paid a lot of money and just work a 9 to 5.
Right. Well, and that's, that's one of the first rules of success. Find somebody that has what you have, or has what you want. Right. And then learn from them. Yeah. Because as you said before we started the recording, success leaves clues.
Yeah, there's patterns to it. It's not an accident.
Absolutely. So you got into practice. And I know that it was 25 years ago. So when you went into practice, what made your practice unique back then?
Back then when I opened, I went the first 6 months before the practice opened. I was waiting for permits and all that stuff. And, in the Chicagoland area, it's a big union town, so everything was really slow. And so I went door to door, and I met 50 people a day, shook their hand, and introduced myself. And I just said, I'm a new doctor in town. I'm looking for a practice to open a practice. Where do you think would be a good site that's needed? And I already had a space leased out. I just didn't know what to say and didn't want them to think that I was a Bible salesman. Everybody answered the door. I put a suit on. I went home that night, and I sent every person a thank you letter for speaking to me. 6 months later, when I opened, we had like 70 patients our first week open. I just not emailed back then, sent them all a letter and called them all. Said we were open. I'd love to have you stop by and see the office. And I met you before. And it was surprising on how many people remembered that and came and actually became patients. So we were profitable like the first week.
Yeah.
Of the shoot.
And it's super old school, but that kind of stuff still works.
Yeah, I didn't know what else to do. I mean, again, I wasn't really doing much else. I worked as a temp a bit. And then about 90 days after opening, I hired a physiatrist that was leaving the hospital and a physical therapist. So the physical therapist, we just put an ad, back then it was the newspaper, and one came on. The physiatrist, I wanted to be integrated right away. And the reason I wanted to be integrated is I had the belief system that, again, there's conditions in healthcare that chiropractic fixes, and it's amazing. There's other conditions in healthcare that people have a need for that, unfortunately, chiropractic can't fix or cure, and you need something else. So my thinking was, if I want to, have a helicopter on the roof, how do I become the guy that can fill all those holes and then be the one to, fill it ethically and then bill for it?
Yeah, no,
so
absolutely.
I called the hospital and started with physiatrists. I figured that's going to be nerves and muscle. And I just asked, hey, I'm a new doctor in town. I'm looking to not partner up, but to bring another doctor on to help us with things that are out of our scope. And I called 6 people, and if I remember, I had about 2 hung up on me. Didn't say he just hung up the phone.
Well, again, it was 25 years ago.
That's right. 1 or 2 said, I'd love to do that, but I'm stuck in a contract here. Good luck. And another guy said, actually, my contract's up. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I'll come over and do something with you. So he came over and part-time was an employee. And I've always owned all of it. I brought everybody on as employees. And he was with me 18 years before he finally retired and moved to California.
That's really cool.
So then it just kept growing. Yeah, growing. But I started integrated right away.
So you went integrated 90 days into practice, which is really cool. So, and again, we're now talking over a period of a couple decades. So tell me about the practice at its height, or maybe it's at its height now.
Yeah, so now the goal was always, helicopter on the roof, or how do I, shortly after that, all the focus became, how do I work myself out of a job? And so I was always looking for just business people, really more than medicine, on how to learn and how to become bigger and grow. So you're not just a giant pizza shop, but you start to run like a corporate 500 company, right? And I thought, at the end of the day, it's medicine and chiropractic, it's still a business.
Oh, yeah.
So, and we're in the sales of chiropractic medicine. So how do I find people that can grow that? And that's kind of what I did. So I always had to carve my own way. I've really never been a part of any types of practice growth groups or anything like that. And when I would speak to them, I didn't seem to match my belief system or line. And the coaches that they would assign me practices weren't as big as mine. So I thought, it's kind of difficult to think you're going to teach me much. I'm bigger than you right now. So why would I pay for this? I don't understand. So we grew very quickly. And I think the E-Factor now is there's a neurosurgeon there. We've got a sleep lab, a pharmacy, a staff of 50. There's physical therapists, and we don't do any family practice, but we do urgent care, walk-in, chiropractic as well. A lot of diagnostics. It's probably easy to share what we don't do instead of what we do.
Wow.
So it's a very large practice.
All right. I love that. So give me some idea. I mean, how many square feet did the practice grow to?
I built a building that was 15,000 feet and was renting out the other half, and the clinic occupies about 8,000 feet.
Okay.
Right now. And then we branched off and did recently did some weight loss stuff as well. And that's now shared in about, I think, 73 different provider offices in 38 states.
That's really cool.
To add to the practice. So, yeah, it's grown quite a bit.
All right.
So we see maybe the pain side, I see about 22 to 23,000 service visits a year. Mm-hmm. So it's a good size clinic.
All right. So clearly you were a master at building a business. So
yeah, I've learned a lot.
Well, exactly. So with all that you've learned, and for people who are listening to this specific episode of the podcast, let's really dial in on what are your 3 keys of success.
I think you have to me anyway. I used to box.
Okay.
15 years I boxed. And with boxing, what I love about it is you can't pawn anything off on anybody else but yourself. You're either prepared or you're not. You can't blame it on a teammate or somebody else was another day, right? And you're either on your game or you get knocked out. It's pretty straightforward. So,
that's true.
What I love about that is that I always equated that to practice. So the belief system has always been, there's always a way. I just refuse to accept the possibility that something can't be done. You might have to pivot on the position, but I just won't accept it. It's not a reality to me. Right. There's a way, you just perhaps haven't found it yet, but I just refuse to accept something can't be done. So a big one for us is just, again, mapping out where you want to be and what you want to do, and adapt or die. Those are probably, I think, the first of the 3 big ones.
All right. So I want to focus on that for just a minute before we transition to the second and then the third. So, because what I just heard you say is decide where you want to be. That's fine. So you've got your goal in mind, but don't get married to the way you're going to accomplish it.
No, yeah, I think that you got to be able to pivot. So from my experience, everything, and when I say medicine, I know it's chiropractic, but healthcare, right?
Sure.
Has had like a 3 to 5 year lifespan before something changes. And that change could be if it's insurance that's not covered, or auto accidents laws in that state change, or comp changes, reimbursement changes. That's, things are bundled, combined,
sure.
Laws change. So, you got to learn to adapt quickly and foresee where those trends are going.
I love that. So there's always a way, and be sure and be willing to adapt. So what's number 2 on your list?
I think it's critical that you start to learn business, like the statistics of the business. This, your patient visit average. If you're marketing, what the cost is to bring a patient in the door, what it cost is to keep them, your acquisition cost, what the value of a patient is, and what it brings to the practice. So that's under the assumption that everybody's doing what they love and they're giving care for a reason, right? It's not just about money, but for me anyway, if we're talking about the business part of it, then you've got to run it like a business.
Of course.
And if you run different types of marketing or back pain or decompression or neuropathy or whatever it is that you're into, you should run each of those like a business. And, the goal should really be working on it instead of in it as much as possible.
So speak to that a little bit more, working in it instead of on it, or on it instead of in it. It's the other way around.
Yeah, I've done over the last probably 18, 20 years, I've done a lot of coaching with different providers, and it's really fun to see the different perspectives. But I think what inhibits growth most from everybody I've coached and seen, and it's not tons, but it's probably roughly 15 to 18 providers a month, every month for 18 years. So it's a good bit of people, is they spend a lot of time working on the practice, but they really don't step back from the practice and look at it as a business and, and analyze the data and the pattern and what's happening with it to make it grow. I mean, what their patient visit average is, and what would happen if they increase it by 2 or 3 visits, or where's their revenue coming from, and what can we add to the practice that they're currently doing or not doing that would make a small change. And it doesn't take a lot. It's just 2 or 3 or 4% here or there at a few different spots, and all of a sudden it's a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I used to work with a doc, and one of the things that I helped him look at more closely was we called it profit centers. So for example,
exactly.
Right. So for example, if you have X-ray in your office, it takes up a certain amount of square footage. That's the room, the footprint. And how many x-rays are you taking? What are you charging for the x-rays? What are you getting reimbursed from a third party for those x-rays? So what is that piece of the business making? Now, that doesn't mean you should just start shooting more x-rays on people. No.
No, but perhaps ones that need it, or could you expand that? Or is there a way to justify doing more to be more thorough and pivoting on that? So instead of saying taking more just to take more, could you take more views or different parts of the spine that would enhance that person's healthcare and make you a more thorough clinician? That's a different viewpoint of the same thing.
Exactly. So, for example, in a personal injury case, simply taking an APN lateral doesn't really tell you all about the anatomy of what you'd be looking for to substantiate the damage that was done in the course of the accident.
Yeah, add obliques or add ultrasound to look at the soft tissue.
Right. See, exactly. Okay. So we've talked about the first two, and we're getting a little bit tight on time, so we have to keep an eye on it. So what's your third one?
Stepping back and acting as if you were a patient to see how could you enhance care through their eyes. So one of the things that got me to grow really fast was I started asking every patient just all through the day, keeping notes on it. What other problems are you having that we're not addressing or nobody's addressed?
Ooh.
And that's how we added a sleep lab. So many people just say, I'm just tired a lot. I'm tired, fatigued, and tired.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, how do you fix that? And I started reading like crazy on PubMed and just going, and thought, well, let's do a sleep study. And then I realized that at the time you got $3,000 when you're at home in bed for every person that you did. It wasn't hard to figure out that if the office is closed and nobody's in it and you can make $3,000 a night, maybe we should start doing it. And if people are complaining about being tired and nobody's fixing it, well, there's a hole right there. Let's close that hole for people.
So I will share with you, of all the docs that I have spoken to, nobody has identified what you just identified. A lot of docs have said things like, I'll do a focus group with my patients and see, what's working, what's not working. Are they waiting too long? Do they not like the music we play? Things like that regarding the office experience. But nobody else, Todd, has said, ask my patients what other areas of life they're having difficulties in. And then as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, fill that healthcare hole. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, think about it. Nobody cares what you want but you. Right? It's not about you. You've dedicated your life, went to school for a very long time to help other people. So nobody cares what you want.
Right. Well, exactly.
Right. It sounds awful, but it's honest, right? You're supposed to be there for other people. So find out what holes there are and start filling them.
Yeah.
I actually added a psychologist because I had a lot of people too. Just said, I feel kind of down a lot. I don't know why. I thought, well, okay, let's get you somebody to talk to about it. So we brought on a psychologist, start seeing people.
Yeah, you're just the fixer. You find a problem.
Yeah, there's a hole you need. Let's find a way. Yeah, but it's not hard. Then just look to see what. It sounds overwhelming, but you start with somebody that can do it part time. Hire them part time for a day, an hour, a week, a month, whatever it is. Look to see what the codes pay. See what you reimburse. Create a budget. Reference that with what they need to get paid, and don't focus on making a lot of money from it. Just focus on getting started with it. The rest will show itself quick.
Yeah, be of service.
Just find a way to help people. Yeah, it'll come.
Hey, a long time ago, one of my first mentors had said to me, the more people you can give what they want, the more they'll be giving you what you want.
Yeah, it's exactly it. That's why I say it's not about you. It's kind of funny. So a lot of times docs will say, what do you like most about our office? You think, who cares about your office? They already like it or they wouldn't be there. So they were focusing on the wrong things.
Well, exactly. That is so true. All right. So we're starting to run short on time. So I've got to transition and ask you a totally different question. So with your years of experience, and you've coached docs and you've built large businesses, can a young doctor who's just getting out of school now, or someone who's in practice and has not found success yet, is it still possible in today's world to become hugely successful?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to want it. You got to want it. You got to be willing to do what other people won't.
Yeah, it's
right. In our world today, as long as people have a spine, it's going to break, it's going to fracture, it's going to get arthritis, you're going to drink, you're going to smoke, you're going to fall down. The question is then, how hard are you willing to go to be the guy they call, for the woman they call, or the doc they call? So every town, right, has 20 chiropractors, and some of them drive Hondas and some drive Porsches or Ferraris. That's not an accident. It's not luck. That's not going to change.
No, exactly. So So having talked about the practice and the business and docs who drive Hondas versus docs who drive Porsches, and they're all great cars, you just get to decide what you're going to drive. How do you define business success?
I think, well, for me, I'd always want the freedom to do whatever I want to do, whether it's travel, boats, planes, to go do what I want to do. And it's finding a balance to make sure that you feel in your heart when you close your eyes at night that you're enhancing and helping other people's lives so they can go do what they want to do. Right. And if you find a way to do that, then you start to apply some of the business skills that we've talked about here. I'm sure several of the other providers you've interviewed have talked about, right? And find that niche for yourself. The rest comes. So for me, it's not as much about visits. It's, are you able to go do the things that you want to do? And for that, I think everybody's a little bit different. But if you can do whatever you want to do, I'd say you're there.
All right. So I'm going to ask another question, and I'm very anxious to hear if the answer is similar or different. So I just asked you to define business success. How do you define personal success?
Yeah, I think for me, they bleed into one another. So the business success, again, it's not necessarily about dollars or visits, but it correlates to it. So for me, I've always felt success by being able to do what I want to do, either for myself or in a relationship, for my wife, for my children, so everybody gets a dream life with whatever you want to do, right? It's a big planet to go explore it and have fun on it. So that equates back to then business success for me would be more financial terms, and the rest is more personal.
Yeah, I absolutely love that.
That make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So if a doc is listening to this and they're like, man, this guy's like super cool, which obviously you are. So, and what would you say to that doc? Okay, you know what? Here's your first step.
I think the first step is to start to learn. If you're looking to grow, the first step is then you've got to learn how to measure your business to gauge where you want to be. So if you want to make more money, or you want to see more patients, you need to know what has to happen, how to market and what the cost of that marketing is to attract those people into the practice, right? And I'm assuming that since they're all providers, they're going to know what to do with them when they come. It's just a matter of getting more of them. There was an old saying that says there's not really much that more new patients won't fix.
Yeah.
Right? So to me, that kind of boils down at the end of the day, no matter what you want to call it or how you spin it, that's kind of what it is. And if you have maxed out on that, then you got to look at capacity issues, space issues, right? What else can you do that you're not doing? Perhaps you're in a really competitive town and you should open a satellite somewhere else or a little bit further away, or add a center, a niche that no one else in your town is doing, whether it's weight loss or neuropathy or whatever that may be. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But fill that void. I promise you.
I love that. Dr. Todd Cevene, thank you so much for taking and making the time to do this interview today. And again, I just can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I hope it helps somebody in some way.
All right. And that's our show for today. If you have a question about today's show or your own practice, feel free to reach out at fortheloveofchiropractic.com. Before making changes to your practice, be sure to seek legal advice regarding those changes and regulations in your state. For the Love of Chiropractic is an RGF production, all rights reserved. And thanks for listening. Original music provided by Hunter Rich Music.